Hey everyone, it's Cantor Yonah Kliger, and welcome to Beyond the Bimah, the podcast. Today we've got a really special episode for you. Our guest is none other than our very own Senior Rabbi, Dan Feder. And we're going to be the clergy in the car getting challah. Where was your challah of choice?
Copenhagen.
Really? Copenhagen?
Oh yeah.
Now,
Copenhagen with sesame seeds.
With sesame seeds. I'm Copenhagen plain, but this begs another very important question. This is something that I never experienced until I got up here.
What's that?
The frosted challah? That's a thing up here.
I don't poo-poo it in general, but it's not my favorite.
Not your favorite.
A little too sweet.
It's a little too sweet, but people love it, and it's a definite Bay Area thing. This is very exciting, actually, to have this opportunity to sit down with you, because this is now I think it's the 4th season of Beyond the Bimah, the podcast. And we realized that we've had lots of really wonderful congregants as guests.
Really interesting ones.
With phenomenal stories, and we've learned so much, but we actually haven't had a chance to talk to you. And thought it would be really great on the occasion of getting ready to celebrate your 18th anniversary as the Senior Rabbi of Peninsula Temple Shalom to finally, it's kind of about time that we're sitting down to have you as our guest.
Sounds great. It's a great program.
We were inspired by, I don't know if you remember that thing that Jerry Seinfeld did called Comedians in the Car Getting Coffee.
Which is a great idea.
And we thought that we would take that concept and turn it into clergy in the car getting challah.
Because what do we do?
We love challah.
And what do we need?
We need challah. Who doesn't love challah? Who doesn't need challah?
And I'm game.
That's one of the things I love about you is that you're pretty much game. It seems like you're pretty much game for anything. There's not too many ideas that I've heard you just say, me? No.
Well, thank you.
I was going to start with some other questions, but since we're here and looking at this amazing view, this Burlingame view, I'm wondering if you might want to just share a little bit about your experience of coming back to Burlingame after the years that you spent away from it, and what being in Burlingame has been like for you and for your family over all these years.
Well, the Bay Area has always been a really deep part of who I am and how I see the world, and being a native San Franciscan, the city and its identity and its neighborhoods was always a really big part of my life, but also what I loved about California and the Bay Area. And one of the hardest parts of choosing rabbinical school was acknowledging to myself that if I'm saying I'm going off to the Hebrew Union College to study for 5 years to be a rabbi, I'm saying to myself that I'm okay with potentially never coming back to the Bay Area, which was a really big decision point for me. And I decided I wanted to be a rabbi so much that, yes, I was okay if I never got the chance to come back. And thank goodness, Sandra and I were able to come back 12 years after ordination, after our first 2 pulpits in Baltimore and Allentown, where we made real homes. But we always hoped in the ideal world that we'd get to come back to the San Francisco Bay Area.
And you grew up in San Francisco, in the city.
Right, in the Richmond district, in the northwest part of the city. So that neighborhood, living close to the Presidio, being able to see the Golden Gate Bridge and the Pacific Ocean and the bay from multiple vantage points every single day, that was a really big part of me.
What was your childhood like? What was it like growing up in the city?
I grew up as the youngest of 4 children, and my mom and dad, Francine and Jack, created a wonderful home for John and Kathy and Cindy and me. And the 4 siblings grew up close to each other, as well as to our parents.
What was the age difference between you guys?
11 years between my brother and me. And so my siblings are 11 and 9 and 4 years older.
It's a pretty big age difference.
Yeah, and it meant that there really wasn't sibling rivalry because we weren't all bunched up together. And it was really like having role models who were 4 and more years older than I, who had been through a lot of life before me. And we did a lot of family vacations together, and we felt like we were really a part of each other's lives. And so that continued when I went off to rabbinical school and had different congregations, and they came to visit. But being able to be back since 2006, where I could be with my dad for the last 2 years of his life, my mom, my siblings, first cousins, as well as my first cousins and second cousins, having the chance to all be together, that's been really, really meaningful. And I love being able to work in a wonderful area and to serve such a wonderful community in an area where I would want to live regardless of whether my congregation happened to be here.
So you would have wanted to have been here regardless?
Ideally. But Sandra and I were always going to live where the best congregation for that time in our life was going to be.
You mentioned that you really, really, really wanted to go to rabbinic school. And not everybody might know this, but that wasn't your first stop after college, right? So you went to Cal, and what did you study?
I studied English, and that was a great
practical major, kind of like me.
But it taught me how to read and to think and to write and to articulate and to tell narratives, and I think that was really good, really strong preparation for rabbinical school.
When you were at Cal studying English, did you have a sense of like what direction your life was going to take, or what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, my brother is one of the happiest attorneys I've ever come across, and I thought, like him, I would find that to be an area that I had a passion for and would want to do it. And it turned out after 1 year at law school at USF, it was not the right fit for me and not an area that I had a deep passion for. It's not that I didn't like law school, but I had no deep interest in it. And I knew whatever I was going to do professionally, I knew I wanted to have a deep passion for it. And it became clear in the year after law school that I really wanted to have an impact in people's lives personally as well as professionally. And during that year between law school and rabbinical school, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and that's not an easy thing at any age, and I was 24 at the time, it became clear that I had always been really satisfied and interested in the Jewish community jobs that I'd had before. It was clear that I wanted to be involved in the life of the community. It was clear that I wanted to be a teacher and be able to do pastoral care or counseling. And it turned out you get to do all those things as a congregational rabbi. So that was a really big part of the decision.
Now, did you have what was your Jewish upbringing like? Like, what was the Jewish life like for you at home? Like, where did this come from?
What my mom and dad gave me, I think, was a sense that Judaism was important and that it added something special and joyful to our lives. I think it's safe to say that nobody in my family would have thought that one of us would grow up to be a rabbi. And certainly until late in college, no one could have seen this coming for me. But I had a friend, still a very close friend, from 9th grade on, Dan Wiener, who I sat next to in the first day of high school at Lowell in typing class. And his dad was the congregational rabbi at Shirth Israel in San Francisco. And my friendship with Dan led to learning a whole lot more about Judaism and Jewish life, the life of a rabbi, and led me to develop a very close relationship with his father, Rabbi Marty Wiener, of blessed memory. And it's safe to say that if it hadn't been for meeting Dan and becoming close to his father, I wouldn't have ever thought about becoming a rabbi. But Marty was really my inspiration. He was incredibly caring and encouraging and motivating, and his example was one that I wanted to emulate. And I thought how he lives would be a way that would make me really happy and content and satisfied, and I would feel good about what I did every day if I did what he did.
So was he the one who said, hey, maybe you ought to apply to rabbinic school, or was this something that was sort of like there on the back burner, kind of like brewing in
Well, he was
inside?
definitely the one, but it was when I was 18, when I was a co-counselor with Dan Wiener at then Camp Swig, and I was sitting out by the pool with a programmer who was midway through rabbinical school, and he said to me at the time, have you ever thought of becoming a rabbi? I think it would be something you'd be really good at. And I appreciated what he said. It's a wonderful thing to hear. But it was as foreign to me as if he had said, have you ever thought about going in a rocket ship to the moon? I really think you would like it there.
Wow.
And so it really didn't stick. But later on in college, in my senior year, I had a lot of conversations with Marty Wiener about it. And ultimately, it felt a little too off the beaten track in 1986 to choose rabbinical school. But in 1989, it felt right. Since then, have you had any other significant people who have been like important influences or mentors for you in your life? I think the two biggest people as mentors from a generation up are Rabbi Marty Wiener and Rabbi Don Berlin, who is the senior rabbi that I worked with for 5 years at Congregation Oheb Shalom in Baltimore. And from the moment I met him during job interviews, I saw in him a person with big ideas who talked about things in a way that I found really compelling and unique. And I thought I would really learn from this person. And I really appreciated the way he also said to me, as Marty Wiener did, that our generation had a particular way of looking at how to have a family life and a career life as a congregational rabbi. And you don't have to do it exactly the way we did, because we made some choices that we wouldn't recommend that you make. And so by their naming it, it made it that much easier for me to try to have a healthier work-home life balance.
Would you say that that's one of the bigger lessons that you took away from him?
Absolutely. And realizing that it's important to be able to sustain one's style of life as a congregational rabbi and as a family person, and that it's really important to feel like one's a success at both, in doing things in a way that are making the people around you happy as well as you happy.
You have 3 daughters, and they're all now they're grown and they're out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel that you achieved this work-life balance that you were just talking about with them as they were growing up?
I suppose it's impossible to do it perfectly, so I certainly don't think I did it perfectly, but I think it's safe to say that Sandra and I had a value really from the beginning, before we had children, that we wanted to make parenting and family life a really important part of our lives together, and that it was going to be a priority, and that we would keep checking in to make sure that it was working for both of us as a couple and individually and for our kids. And so the fact that Rachel and Abby and Ellie all had very positive experiences growing up in Baltimore and Allentown and in Burlingame, in really strong, warm, loving connections to, I think, both my profession, the synagogue, and their communities in each place, makes us really, really happy.
I think it's really hard to do it, and it's really hard to find that balance. And I mean, being a congregational rabbi, just there's so many demands, and everybody kind of feels as if they are the most important. Oops.
This is a lovely cul-de-sac.
This is where I get lost in. How do we get back to the main street?
Yeah, a lot of rabbis have never made it out of parts of Hillsborough doing minyanim.
It's so confusing.
In the dark.
I'm like, I know how to get that way, but now I'm like,
I think we go one more block and then a left.
Okay.
I think.
All right, we'll see. This is where I still am like, I'm such a newbie. I don't know where the heck I am, but it's beautiful. This is a beautiful neighborhood.
Well, historically, this is before directions apps, but people would say there's really very little crime in Hillsborough because would-be thieves don't risk it because they know they can't get out of there easily.
You came here as a pretty young rabbi. I imagine that you had hopes and dreams and visions, and not visions, but you had a vision for the synagogue. And I'm wondering if, you might share a little bit about what your thoughts were and hopes were for the congregation then, and now sort of like looking back 18 years later, like where you feel you've achieved those things, what you're still hoping to achieve in as you continue in this next part of your career.
Well, I think one thing, I was really excited coming out in 2006 with the hope, you never know how things are going to go, but with the hope that I would be here for a really long time and see multiple stages and multiple generations in congregational families' lives. And it's incredibly fun and gratifying to see that play out. So I had always hoped that I'd stay in one place for a long time, because it's such a rich feeling to have had multiple kinds of experiences with families and to see lots of different peak wonderful moments in their lives throughout the years. So that was always the hope. And I think coming in 06, I see it's kind of natural, since it's 18 years, to think of it in 3 periods of 6 years each. And I think from 2006 to 2012, it was really getting to know the community and to keep growing certain things and to develop some new things. But I think when I came back from my sabbatical in the summer of 2012, and we decided to make community organizing something that we wanted to take very much to heart and develop and use as a tool for congregants to really get to know each other better, that was really transformative. And that allowed us to create a whole lot of deeper relationships and to create a lot more community. But it also led to us as a community seeing service to the broader community as a really important part of who we were. So it became clear after many, many, many parlor meetings that people were very interested and concerned about mental health, and in particular, teen mental health. And so we started a teen mental health initiative, and a mental health initiative in broader terms, applying to all people. And I think that allowed us to be very real with each other and ourselves. And that honesty led to really great growth as a community. So I think from 2012 to 2018, we really deepened our sense of commitment to being of service to the broader community, and hosting a mental health symposium that attracted people from the North Bay to the South Bay was really powerful. And I also think since 2018 to 24, we've really grown as a community and developed in so many beautiful ways in terms of worship, in terms of social justice, in terms of creating real community and honesty among our youth. And, some of the principles that have been popular socially in the Jewish world, like relational Judaism, have really become just a part of how we do everything, which is nice to see.
It's interesting because, one small snapshot of that I've seen since I've been here is something as simple as our Oneg Shabbat. We have a lovely Shabbat service, lasts an hour and 20 minutes, whatever it is. And then at the end, we've got this Oneg, and people really stick around because I think that they like being with each other and they like spending time with each other. And you really get the sense that there is this relational thing that you're talking about. If that weren't true, they'd grab a piece of whatever, a cookie or some challah, which we're about to go get, and they'd be off, they'd be out, because service is certainly early enough that they could go home and have dinner or go out and have dinner. But so that's just a small thing, but I think that that speaks volumes to who we are as a congregation in many ways.
Thank you for saying that, and I really agree with you. And it's evolved too, because during that middle stage from 2012 to 2018, we tried some things early on with the new time of the service, that is 6:30. And we would have suggested discussion questions as prompts to encourage people to talk communally and to talk about things that they might not otherwise talk about that would be a little more personal and maybe a little more meaningful and help people who didn't know each other yet, perhaps, talk openly with each other. And so we've gone from those prompts to people staying for a good long time. And it's really gratifying to see people sit down around the tables or standing and staying for quite a long time to talk. And talking to lots of different people, too.
Yes, they're not always talking to the same people. I've noticed that.
I love that.
Oh, look at this. We got a spot right in front. You know, Sydney calls that parkma.
That is definitely parking karma.
Now, I'm going to change gears for a second because we're sitting right here in front of Copenhagen, which for me, like since I came here, this is my go-to for challah on Friday mornings. I would drop off the kids at the school, and then I'd come over here and grab challah.
Great custom.
So let's go in and see what they got.
Sounds good.
All right. It's one of the things about baseball, like that feeling like never leaves you. Like when I was watching the World Series and when Freddie hit that walk-off,
right.
Like my 10-year-old self.
You can be an adult and it's still like you're 11 years old.
What's with the whole beat LA business? What's with that?
Oh, well, that's very complex. Let's see. I think it goes back to when the Dodgers were really good and the Giants were not really good, year after year after year. And there was something about Tommy Lasorda and Steve Garvey and Ron Say and Davey Lopes and Reggie Smith and then Dusty Baker that made Giants fans think these guys are arrogant and they're really good. And we're miserable and cold in this concrete wind tunnel of Candlestick Park, and they've got Dodger Stadium, and it made Giants fans resentful. But now it's so different, but that chance still exists. I think there's something very tribal about people in general, and baseball fans, and LA feelings among Giants fans. But the funny thing is, if you were in Italy, and you saw somebody wearing a Dodger cap, you say, oh, here's a Californian, and there's a baseball fan, and you would talk to that person.
Yeah.
But within the same stadium, they're the bad guys.
So interesting. Well, we got a lot of challah. I mean, we've got your favorite.
This is the best.
Sesame.
But this is very good.
We got the poppy. We got the plain, and then we got this
Classic,
and then we got the dessert challah, which I don't know. It's still, for me, it's like it's an acquired. I mean, it's delicious, but it's an acquired.
Yeah, it's number 4. It's number 4.
Number 4. Well, I guess we should probably have some.
We should have some, and we should do it upright.
Do it upright. Should we say the motzi and everything?
We should say the motzi and everything.
Right. Well, this thing is not going to cover the whole thing, but sort of like. All right, we're going to sort of like suspend disbelief. You said that there was something special about this cover too?
Yeah, our family was in Israel on a congregational trip in 2008, and we got this in the old city and gave it to the congregation.
And this is the one that we use pretty much every Friday night.
Yeah, this is for a regular Friday night.
Is that where you developed the wrist flick?
Yeah, the weight, the aerodynamics just felt right with this one.
Can you do it on other ones, or does it only work on this one?
It works best with this, just because of training, but I think I could do it with other ones.
All right. And is it a lefty or a righty thing? Or
when it comes to challah twisting,
you're a switch hitter?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
All right, should we do it?
We should do it.
Want to do the long one or the short one, like the preschool one?
How about the Shabbat evening one?
Shabbat evening one?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'te'avon.
All right, which one?
After you.
After you. Well, you
Okay.
got to start. You got to start.
Gotta
with that
start
one.
with this, the best piece,
All
right here.
Go. All right. Here, let's do a little.
To you.
That's pretty good.
That's really good. Takes a sec.
Yeah. I was thinking about how whenever we're in your office, you've always got music on. You've always got something
That's true.
playing, and I've never worked with anybody who's always had music on before, and I love it. It took a little while to get used to, but just curious to know about that. Have you always sort of needed a work environment with music on in the back? And
Well, I've always loved music, and my brother John, and in particular my older sister Kathy, turned me on to their music when I was a really little boy. So from the time I was a really little kid, I loved the Rolling Stones, the Beach Boys, the Beatles, the Temptations, Paul Revere and the Raiders. And I always had a record player from the time I was probably 5 years old in my bedroom. And I remember being a student at the Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles, and they assigned us young rabbis to be our mentors. And one year, Rabbi Dan Feder at the congregation in Tarzana,
I know it well.
and I spent a lot of time with him. And I'm in his study, and I noticed he had a stereo right behind him, and music was playing. And I thought, this is as a 25-year-old, boy, someday I would love to have a stereo in my study and just be able to listen to good music when I'm in my study. It would really set a wonderful ambiance. And so from the time I was in Baltimore, I've always had some kind of stereo system so I could play music to set the mood, to help me get into the groove, into the flow. And sometimes I have it on really, really, really quietly, and probably only I can hear it, but because it's a playlist that I'm familiar with, it just kind of helps me focus and concentrate more.
Do you keep it
to
on?
me, it's not distracting.
Do you keep it on when you're writing too?
Oh yeah, I always write with music going. And I have different playlists, mellow music, slack E guitar, classical music, some solo piano. I love music in general in all kinds of different forms, but in particular for writing or reading to help concentrate, it has to not be distracting.
Do you have like particular moods that you like, playlists with different moods that sort of go with what you're feeling or needing for that day?
Sure.
Playlist?
Well, I have a slack E guitar.
I'm going to break into this one, the sweet one, just because it's sitting there, and how could we not? You want some?
Sure.
You don't have to.
Oh, I will.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so cheers.
So slack E guitar is really good for focusing. And my father-in-law, Joe, turned me on to slack E guitar. And in particular, he was very friendly with John Chiave. And I got to hear him play live a couple of times on the island of Hawaii, and the music really moved my soul. So that's really fun and inspiring for me to listen to. I have a mellow playlist with some instrumental, some guitar, some piano, and some easy to listen to vocal music that, for me, puts me into a positive headspace for concentrating, reading, writing. I have Jewish music, I have Israeli music, or rock and roll music. I have kind of an elastic playlist called Many Moods. So that's good for all kinds of different moods. And when I'm working, it has to be music that I'm familiar with, because if I'm familiar with it, it doesn't break my concentration. And so in general, I don't have like random or turn a song into a radio station, because then I'll think, oh, what's the next song? Oh, I haven't heard that before. And when I'm working, I don't want to have that distraction.
Interesting. What about live music? Like, can you remember your first concert?
Oh yeah, it was The Who.
Wow. Where?
I was 15 at the Oakland Arena. And in San Francisco, you could take a muni bus from the Richmond district to downtown. You could take BART downtown right to the Oakland Coliseum Arena. And we were really close, and we were really close to a speaker. And it was really, really loud and wonderfully so. And
who'd you go with?
Went with Steve Kay. And it was a great time. And the earliest concerts I saw were The Who, and the Rolling Stones, and the Beach Boys, and the Temptations.
I know that you love Jewish music, and in fact, for your big weekend that's coming up in a couple of weeks, we, as part of it, we've been able to work with Michael Oakes, the composer,
so special.
We commissioned him to write a new song. The confluence of your love of Jewish music that we had this weekend already, and then Mike, it just was perfect. And so he wrote this song that we're going to debut in a couple of weeks, and it's based on one of your favorite pieces of text from Exodus. You want to talk a little bit about it?
So I didn't grow up with Jewish music, and it sounds funny, but I'll give another baseball example. I remember the 1988 postseason. The LA Dodgers had this great pitcher named Oral Hershiser, who's in the midst of one of the most incredible, impeccable pitching performances over an extended period ever recorded, except maybe Bob Gibson. And they would always go to Oral Hershiser in the dugout between the innings that he was pitching, and he was clearly singing a song. And the broadcasters were talking about, he's singing religious music, he's singing Christian music that touches his soul, and isn't that beautiful? And I remember at that time, really out of ignorance, thinking, gee, I wish we had something like that in Judaism. And I didn't realize we did, and I could, and I just didn't personally know how to access it yet. And so then, when I started rabbinical school, and I became a real lover of Debbie Friedman's music, Beth Schaefer's music, Rick Reck's music, Dan Nichols' music, Alana Arian's music, over the decades, I realized that we had our own treasure trove of beautiful music that could be comforting, inspiring, touching, all these different moods and modes and nuances could be touched. And so music's always been a really important part of my life as a rabbi. And so very early in my rabbinic career, I was reading a magazine for youth workers, and it was actually a Christian magazine, so it was about Christian ministry, but I just took the ideas and applied it to Judaism. And I remember there was a page where, like, special pull-out card with a verse from the Bible, and it was Exodus chapter 15, verse 2. And I immediately went right to the Plow Torah commentary and checked out the context, and the idea is that Adonai, God, is my strength and my song. And I found that so touching. The notion of finding strength from God is one thing, but the notion that God's song courses through my body, or that my life is lived like a song to God, or God's music courses through me, I found all of them really inspiring and touching. And
or even the idea that like we can get strength through song.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And so when I had an opportunity to have a talit custom made, I picked particular verses, and one of them was sing a new song to God. And then when I had this new opportunity within the past 6 months to pick a verse to, of all things, turn into a piece of music, it was easy, as we and you and I with Michael talked about it, to think it's Exodus 15:2. Like, that's who I am right now, and that's what I would love to turn into a piece of music. And the fact that he could do it so naturally was just so beautiful. We're doing pretty well with it.
Not bad. Not bad. We even broke into the sweet one.
It's hard to shake people's hands
after that. Because like you kind of want to lick your finger.
And like you want to shake, but your hand's all sticky. And
I know, and then you don't want to. You got the little sprinkles on top.
Yeah, and it's like, dude, what'd you do to my hand?
They clearly weren't thinking about that part of it. Like they weren't thinking about our jobs of shaking people's hands. I want to go back to the song, to the quote, which also we didn't plan it, but it also happens to be from that week's Torah portion,
which is just, I mean, that's Kismet.
Kind of cool.
And that is Shabbat Shirah.
Right. The Shabbat of Song, where we celebrate having crossed the sea after we're enslaved.
Perfect coincidence.
It's really perfect. So I'm just going to like throw this out there. I think people assume that as clergy, assume certain things about our belief and our faith, and I think it's realistic for people to have assumptions. Mm-hmm. But I don't like. I'm really curious to know. We've actually never really talked about it. Like, how does God play a part in your life, and where do you get faith from? Or does God?
Well, it definitely does. That's a wonderful question. So it's been really a journey with my relationship with the divine over the decades. I remember really clearly being maybe 11 years old, and I was having a conversation with my mom, and I had some kind of a question about God, and my mom said, "Oh, you know what, you should talk to your dad because he believes in God." And that stuck out with me for a couple of different reasons. One, that my dad believed in God, and one that that wasn't really what my mom felt ready to have a conversation with me about. And I remember when I was thinking about the rabbinate and talking with Marty Wiener, Rabbi Wiener, and at that point in the conversations over a long time, it was clear that there were aspects of what a rabbi did that were a nice fit. But I had doubts, specifically because I wasn't sure if I believed in God. And could I be a rabbi at a congregation if I wasn't sure if I believed in God? And he gave me the best advice in the world. And it was so wise, but also really, really sweet. He said, you should apply. You should go to rabbinical school. And when you're in Israel for that first year, suspend disbelief. And just let it happen. Whatever it is that happens. And so that gave me the permission not to continuously doubt or question, like, what about God and what about this and what about that, but to just kind of leave myself open to it without being hindered by self-questioning. And I really did that for the 5 years of rabbinical school. And then I remember being in Baltimore. Now I'm an assistant rabbi, and I'm in some group situation, like, I don't know, with a grade and parents, something like that, maybe 30, 40 people there. And I was talking really freely and openly and with conviction about God. And I thought, like, as I'm speaking to the group, I smiled to myself and I thought, well, how about that? Look at you. It seems like you believe in God and you're talking to this group about it. Like, how about that? How did that happen? And it just was really gradual. And I think it happened because I could let it happen, because I wasn't doubting it every step of the way. Otherwise, I think I would have constricted myself. So over time, I think I found a faith that gives me a lot of comfort and strength and inspiration. But it's happened very gradually, and now 30 plus years as a rabbi, I can think of particular prayers and particular psalms. Like, there's a beautiful psalm that speaks of finding strength and centering in God, and I shall not be shaken. And I love the idea that my sense of who I am and my sense of Judaism and my sense of God is such that I'm not going to be blown over by the winds of events or change or anything like that, because I'm centered. And for me, that's a really nice metaphor of how a faith for me in the divine can give me a sense of solidity.
What do you say to the 11-year-old kid who comes to you with that same question that you had when you were a kid?
That I think it's really wonderful that you're thinking about God. And I think the one thing that is a part of Judaism is thinking about God, engaging in God, but you don't have to believe in God. And if you don't believe in God, it's a part of our tradition to keep thinking about God and keep thinking, this is why I don't believe in God, and checking in with yourself about that, because I think God is part of the equation, even if we don't believe in God. And that I think it's really important to me to express to people that in Judaism, as a religion, God is part of the equation, but there has always been, and I imagine there always will be, people who live contributing wonderful lives as members of the Jewish people who are avowed atheists and who do not believe in God, that's okay. And I think that's a special part of our Jewish tradition, that there isn't a litmus faith test to be a part of this people or to be considered a good person.
I can relate. When I was debating whether or not the Cantor was for me, I was also at a point in my life where I was like, all the pieces seemed right except for this one thing. I wasn't sure about God and my relationship to God, or if there was a God. And I remember very clearly going to one of my mentors and expressing this doubt. And he was a more old school thinker. And he said to me, you know, if you're not sure and you want to be a leader of our people, then maybe this isn't the path for you.
Wow. And what did you do with that?
I went to somebody else. I wanted to get another perspective. And the perspective that I got was similar to what you just shared, which was, remember what our name is, or what one of our names is, Yisrael.
Exactly.
That we wrestle with God, we struggle with it, and that's encoded in who we are, in our name even. And so if you are wrestling and if you are struggling, then even more reason to dive in. And there have been times in my life where I've been sure as anything, and there have been times in my life where I continue to wrestle and continue to struggle.
There's not only one way of looking at it. Like that wonderful mentor, it may have been right for him to think that it wasn't right for you if you don't believe in God, but that wasn't the only way to look at it. But I bet it could be quite difficult to hear that from a person you respect, and gosh, then maybe I shouldn't. And I remember there was a young rabbi who said to me when I was thinking about rabbinical school, he said, if there is anything else you could do professionally that would make you happy, you shouldn't be a rabbi. If there's anything else that you could do, like this is an extreme choice. If there's anything else you could do it and don't be a rabbi.
Wow.
And that was a wow. And
Because there's, so many things.
And I respected where he was coming from, and I still respect him. Wonderful career as a rabbi, a lot of wisdom. But that was, for me, a rather extreme way of looking at it, because I think for anything, there's more than one way of looking at it. There's more than one profession for everybody. There are just so many. It's never just one thing.
There's more than one way to call a page number. And I'm referring, you know what I'm referring to? Do you?
I think so, but go for it.
Page 49.
Well, that really started with, when I got to Burlingame, there was a whole contingent, like 3 different families, all of whom, for all of them, French was their first language. And they were often hard of hearing, and I could hear them in the first couple rows saying, quelle page, qu'est-ce qu'il a dit? And so,
What page? What did he say?
so I could hear what they were saying, and so I would say, page 89.
Right. Pourquoi pas?
And it keeps my French vocabulary sharp, especially numbers. Keeps it fresh.
It's not everybody who can, quickly call out the page numbers just like that in French.
Not everybody could or would want to.
It's been so wonderful to get to sit down and talk to you and
For me too.
learn more about you. Before we wrap up, there's this tradition that we have with Beyond the Bimah, and it's our version of the 4 questions.
Really? What's that?
All right, so you don't.
Do I get to ask the question?
No. You get to answer these questions.
All right.
Okay, question number 1. What brings you hope?
Gosh, the smiles and the energy and the feeling when we greet the kids and the parents coming into the building on Sunday mornings at Youth Ed, and the feeling I get when we're leading tefillah for the younger kids and the older kids, often with parents there at Youth Ed. That gives me hope.
Beautiful. Okay, fill in the blank to the end of this line. I am my best self when?
When I'm surrounded by people with whom I feel inspired and safe and doing something that we collectively have a joy in doing together.
If you could view the world through anybody else's eyes, whose eyes would you view the world through and why?
I think it would either be Moses or Hillel, because both were people of a unique vision and perspective and had a way of articulating and advocating a sense of self individually and collectively, with a feeling of responsibility both for advocacy of others and for self in the immediate and in the long term. And both remind me of the importance of accountability. And I find that inspiring in both.
And lastly, what makes you proud to be Jewish?
A lot of things. One, that I feel like we gave the world a number of gifts, a sense that the world is unified by being created by one God, that teaches us that every human being is created in the image of God. Every human is holy. We all come from the same original 2 human beings, and so we are all equal. And anytime anybody is raising themselves up or pushing others down is really an affront to the Jewish way of looking at the world when we're being authentic. And so I think those are pretty incredible gifts to the world. And I'm happy to be in a profession where I get to try to teach those things to other people.
Rabbi Dan Feder, I will speak on behalf of our entire congregation when I say that we are so thrilled that there was no other profession that you could have imagined yourself doing, because boy, are we
Thank
lucky.
you. Thank you.
For the last 2.5 years, I'm lucky to be your partner and your friend, and this community has been so blessed by you over the last 18 years, and God willing, may it be just many, 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 many more years that we continue to be blessed by your leadership, your mentorship, your menschlichkeit, your authenticity, and just you being the amazing you that you are. It is really such an honor and such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. That's really sweet of you. The feeling's mutual, too.